Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Network. My name is Chad Smeltzer, and I'm your host. If this is your first time watching or listening, please follow and subscribe. On this episode, we have a special guest, Dr. Heidi Gregory-Mina, who is a business psychologist, author, and professor specializing in mental health with over 14 years of experience. She has worked in the health sector and higher education, focusing on employee engagement, stress, and burnout. Dr. Heidi is passionate about helping organizations create a positive work culture and supporting individuals in maintaining their mental well-being. This is a sensitive and sad topic, but I wanted to get Heidi's perspective on mental health and construction because the more we talk about it, the more aware we are and we can help others. And in this episode, it's our own opinion and experiences, and we don't cover all the necessary steps to getting help in addressing this issue, but we want to bring awareness to it, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So thank you. Have a great day. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Network. My name is Chad Smeltzer. I am your host. Today's guest is Dr. Heidi, who is a business psychologist, author, and professor who focuses on mental health. Thank you for joining me, Heidi.
Hi, Chad. Thank you for having me on.
I got through the introductions. That was a couple takes. It's Monday morning. It was a little rough there. So you and I, we met in LA. One thing I thought about was getting together with you and talking about mental health with construction and things like that. And so give us a little background on like your history of what you've done and kind of where you're at, and then we'll get into that conversation.
Sure, absolutely. So, I came from the healthcare sector before getting into higher education. I worked in the Department of Psychiatry for 15 years. I started out there managing their grants and research portfolio, about $120 million, federal state foundation grants. And then I became their admin director. And this concept of stress and burnout is personally near and dear to me because that is actually what I hit when I was working at Boston Medical Center. And so I think it's really important for people to understand the difference and the signals that they see between stress and burnout and this other concept that people hear in the workplace, quiet quitting, because they have, from the outsider's perspective, a very similar look, but they are very different. And the biggest difference is if you're quiet quitting from your job, it's you're disengaging from the work that you're doing because you're not passionate about it. But if you hit stress and burnout, it's not that you don't like your work anymore. It's that you are mentally and physically drained from the work and you're disengaging from it because of that. And it's not that you don't have the passion for the work anymore. And I think that's a really important distinction for people to understand. And I didn't personally really understand it fully myself till I went through it. And mine was actually so bad, I actually had to take 6 months off of work because I hit burnout. It got to the point that I physically could not give anymore. And it manifested into physical ailments as well as just mental fatigue. My body was tired. Everything was just tired. And it really took 6 months of coming back. And while I wish I didn't go through it, I'm kind of glad I did because I have a much better sense now for what those signs are, what to watch for, when to know to kind of step back a little bit to focus on self-care so it doesn't happen again. And because it really cost a lot to everybody. It cost my department a lot. It cost the people I was supporting a lot. It cost my family a lot. So it has a big cost structure with it. And then from there, I moved into higher education. That's kind of where I find myself now, along with consulting. The two somehow simultaneously go hand in hand. My major focus is in business psychology. Most people say, what is business psychology? I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I am actually have my doctorate in management with a focus on organizational psychology. So I look at organizations, any industry, it doesn't matter. And I look at the people within them and I'm able to help work on employee engagement, topics such as the one we're talking about now, stress, burnout. We look at the organizational culture, how that's impacting, how you can make an organizational culture shift. We look at structure, negotiation, all of those kind of gray area things, so to say, in an organization that are hard to capture, hard to measure, and sometimes hard to identify. And absolutely love working in that space. And now I'm trying to, in the last year or so, really work. I'm not going to say work myself out of the classroom. I don't ever see myself leaving the classroom because I do enjoy teaching and working with the next generation and kind of giving them the skill sets they need to go into the workplace, but definitely spending more time sharing my knowledge and expertise outside of the classroom.
And how many years have you been doing this?
Going on about 14 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. That's a long time. A lot of
Yes.
experience there. Well, this is great. I appreciate your time and joining us here and giving us some insight on how we can better prepare ourselves for mental health issues, depression, things like that, anxiety, all those things. Everybody kind of goes throughout their life in different times. So appreciate you joining us here and sharing some insights. So it'll be fun. So our focus today is construction because the infrastructure network is really focused on utilities, water, sewer, just construction in general in that space, and not just that with utilities, but in general construction. Building a building is the same as putting in underground utilities. It's a stressful job.
Mhm.
It can be not time consuming, but very time extensive. I don't know if that's the right word, but it can put a lot of pressure on you as you're out there every day in the cold and different environments and things like that. So if you really think of what these construction workers go through, it's a lot. And then
Yeah.
if you really, I had a discussion with some friends of mine. You're gonna talk to them tomorrow. Actually, my wife and Mary Clark, we had a discussion about the way men in general kind of get together and they have this environment where they create this toxic environment together. And I'm wondering if that's some of the sources of where construction workers really don't have a place to talk or vent, just release that because they'll be looked upon as weak or
Mhm.
not strong enough to stay with the group of guys that are doing construction. If that makes any sense, that's kind of what we were talking about. So I'm curious on your
Yeah.
thoughts on some of that.
It's really interesting you say that, Chad, because, I do a lot of research in this area. And one of my major lines of research is really studying women in leadership. So you might be saying, what in the world would that have to do with construction workers? But it actually has a lot to do because as I study that, I start to learn more about our society, our history, different industries, and how they look at different things. And there are definitely industries historically within our culture that have been predominantly masculine. And then there have been other industries that have been predominantly feminine. And the
Hmm.
industries that have been predominantly masculine carry a lot of those traits. And with a lot of those traits, we don't have, our society has never opened up to the idea of showing your emotions, being empathetic, talking about feelings. Those are even tricky conversations within industries that are more welcoming for those type of conversations. But within, I think about like construction, firefighters, really a lot of the trade type areas is
Yeah.
historically been deemed as a masculine industry. And that's been also very hard for women to penetrate into those areas if they want to work in it. And then on top of it, it's a very labor intensive job. When we talk about stress and burnout, a lot of times people are saying, oh, they look at their workload more from a mental standpoint, that you're mentally burned out. Well, yes, you're going to be mentally burned out, but within these industries, you're also physically burnt out. And so we're seeing within these industries, we're seeing burnout happening at unprecedented rates and happening much faster
Mm.
because of the combined physical and mental burnout and work that's happening. And then there's a lack of infrastructure in place or acceptability for people to really talk about how they're feeling, to recognize when they need to take a step back, take a day off, to really talk about self care within that industry, because that is predominantly in our society. Historically, we've deemed this term self care as a feminine characteristic. And,
Right.
that's something that's not been fully engulfed within these male dominated traits yet.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's minimal females that are in that
Mhm.
workforce. So then you have, if you really think about it, it's just a bunch of dudes and testosterone, and they're just sitting there, just complaining about their life. I've been around
Mhm.
these toxic places where you get one bad apple, and he or she can just spread across all these different people that they're working with, and just create that really toxic environment. And it just becomes even worse for anyone that's dealing with a stress at home or wherever they're dealing with different stress and anxiety issues. So I can see how, well, first of all, I see how more women in this space would make things a lot better, because you get different perspectives, and people like construction workers have more people to talk to and release that stress and anxiety by getting different perspectives than kind of where just guys are like, don't cry, don't talk about
Right.
emotions. Just getting these bad environments, and they'll be talking about their wives, their families, like all this negative stuff that's around there. I can only imagine, where this could just spiral into really a suicide rates. And there's some interesting statistics that I was looking up before we started. 53.2%, or 53.2 per 100,000 US workers are suicide rates.
Yeah.
Its construction industry has one of the highest rates of suicide, 53.2 per 100,000.
That doesn't surprise me, Chad.
Crazy.
And think about this too. Look at the timelines a lot of these people are working under, the obligations that they take onto their plate. I have someone very close with who's in the construction industry who I've done some work with. And, you know, I do not envy him. I could not be in his shoes. Some of it is self-created. He talks with people. He doesn't want to say no. So he says, yeah, I can probably do that job, or I could probably do that job. Then he has people texting him for quotes, and he reverts to just not responding, because it's
Oh,
easier for him to not respond than to say, I'm sorry, I've overcommitted myself. And, it's just this perpetual cycle that continues to happen. And, then, we have to be on this job. Then he promises he's going to be on this job. He sends half his crew here, and he sends half his crew here, and his crew is tired. Injuries start to happen because they're not working at their fullest. It's just, it's a spider web waiting to just explode.
yeah, yeah. Literally, it's terrible. I mean, you really start to think about it, and you talk about the burnout, even in general, just having to get up at 5 in the morning early. You think about a construction worker,
Mhm.
right? They want them there on the job by 6 a.m. They get started every day. You're going to bed by 9 o'clock,
Mhm.
8 o'clock. I mean, you don't have a lot of time with your family. You're probably getting home at 3 or 4 o'clock. Now, I know guys are getting done at early, 2 o'clock, things like that. But
But
they
it's
have
still
that.
not enough time if you have family obligations and
Yeah.
you have things you have to do there. The kids aren't going to bed. You're praying they go to sleep, and they're still screaming at like 8 o'clock at night, and you're trying to wrangle them. That's
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it's still not, you're not decompressing. You're not finding that time. You're not coming home and just sitting there and saying, I'm going to relax. And I can tell you, some of my friends who are in the field who don't come home to a family, that, you know what they end up doing? They end up going out with their buddies to the bar and hanging out and doing, these things. And then
Yes.
they're out to all hours, and then they're coming home for a few hours, and then they're getting up the next morning, or they're calling in late.
And you beat me to it, because the bars and hanging out with the same crowd
Mm-hmm.
that you work with.
Mm-hmm.
My One of my friends does this all the time. He's like, "Well, we go hang out," but you're still putting yourself in that same environment that you deal with at work, and you're now doing it on the weekends or whenever you're hanging out. Like, everyone's complaining about the boss or whoever their project managers are,
Yeah.
things like that. It's just so you never really, like you said, decompress. It's crazy.
Absolutely. And I mean, constantly being around people who all that you do, and I get it, you need to vent, you're letting out those emotions, but to
Hmm.
constantly be in that state of negativity and negative thought, you're never going to get beyond it. I can tell you, it was a funny story. When I hit burnout, I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. And I was sitting on Newberry Street in Boston having lunch, and this was post burnout. I was away from healthcare at this point. I was in higher ed, and I was just having lunch. And someone I knew from the medical center walked by, and literally just walked by me. And I looked back and I said, "You don't even say hi anymore, stranger?" And then she looks back and she goes, oh my God. She goes, I'm so sorry. I didn't even recognize you sitting there at first. And we started chatting. She's like, I can't get over it. And I'm like, I didn't understand what she was like. I'm like, my look hadn't changed. I'm like, at least to me, my look hadn't changed. Like, I didn't have like a different haircut or anything. I'm like, I don't understand. And she's like, you look happy.
Oh.
And I was like, shocking to me. And I looked at her, I said, why? Did I look miserable? And she goes, honestly, yeah, you always looked like you were just like straight face and going. And I was like, and thought back about it. I always was. And it wasn't because I didn't care about anybody else. It was because like literally I had like 12 deadlines a day and I was from one meeting to the next and I didn't have time to stop and talk to anybody. I couldn't network. I couldn't forge a relationship with my employees to understand what they wanted or what their needs were because my plate had, I was working about 210% into my job and I was just go, 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 go. And, that's industry wide these days. We're all captured by so many things, but yet we have to maintain relationships and we have to get to know our employees if we want an engaged workforce. And, how do you find time for that when you have all of these other things? And these things, unfortunately, to senior management and to your boss are more important because those are tangible. They can measure those. They can say, oh, I can see how that's going to improve my ROI. Trying to convince somebody that making somebody happy will increase productivity, will increase ROI is much harder to do because you don't have something tangible. You don't have a widget to show them. Right.
That's very similar to why I transitioned my career. My path was very similar. I was like, they wanted the construction guys I was working for, the business, they wanted me to get back on the road, do my traveling, visit all these cities. This is after COVID. They were like putting everybody back on the road. And I was just so burnt out from the goals and the quarterly things that I had to hit, the targets, the ROI that you're talking about that they wanted. And I was like, I'm stressed. I got the kids still, because school was still kind of half and half. It was at home and it was still, it was virtual and at school. But it was so stressful just trying to keep kids, get them to their destinations, manage their career, keep the job going. And I was just done. I just couldn't do it. I was just like, I'm out. Peace. That's when I started my thing too. Just, it kind of related to that. I ran into a car. I like smashed into a car because I wasn't paying attention. I was like, that's it. I was rock bottom there. I was like, I got to make a change. I knew.
I have some very staggering statistics. You want to hear them?
Yeah.
And I looked them up just because I knew we were going to be talking about this particular industry. 68% of people working within the construction industry are either completely disengaged with the work that they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And 50% of them are what we refer to this new category, quiet quitters. It's just employees who are only satisfied with work, meaning like, I may show up on time. I'm just kind of half doing it. And to me, if I was working in accounting and I found out the person sitting next to me was disengaged with their work, I'd probably say, well, it's too bad for them. If I'm working construction and I have someone who's responsible for my life because I'm up top somewhere and they are completely disengaged with the work they're doing and they could care less and they're just daydreaming, or that's scary. That is so scary to think so much of the workforce doesn't actually want to be doing what they're doing.
That's interesting you say that because I see on LinkedIn a lot of posts about construction workers, on the road doing construction, getting hit by cars, getting buried with trenchless. They're just not paying attention, not doing the right things. They're not wearing the right gear, whatever protections that they should have in place. And it's all profit. They're trying to, what it comes down to is profit more than safety. I mean, they're really just trying to make these construction guys do all this work and they're going to end up getting hurt. And
on top of it, we're in a labor shortage. So while other industries can say, all right, this might not be the right person for the right job, it's not going to be life or death detrimental for the company. But
Yeah.
for these particular fields, it is life or death. You need people in these particular fields who are responsible for other people's lives, infrastructure that's being built, even the post work. If it's shoddy work being put together and then someone needs to
Mm.
drive on it, live in it, be in it, and it falls apart or something happens.
Yeah.
I mean, look what happened. I don't know if you followed what happened here in Boston with the big dig. And that was a
Oh,
disaster construction project. Not to mention that once it finally did open, there were actually tiles from the roof coming down on top of cars.
holy smokes.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that 60% disengaged, that tells you right there what's going on. And that's kind of what my thing with fixing infrastructure has always been about when I left to try and solve this problem is like the quality of work that I was seeing just for sewers and maintaining sewer systems and building new sewers was the guys weren't applying the materials correctly. So that kind of goes right to your statistic. I
yep,
mean, I'm watching these things fall apart in 1 year. I'm like, and then all of our taxpayer money is going to
I know.
waste because we're trying to fix infrastructure, but it's falling apart
Yeah.
because we have disengaged construction workers that just don't care. And they're just, again, profit versus safety kind of thing. Yeah.
And the
Crazy.
thing is, at the end of the day, it is fixable. That is the
Right.
thing. It is fixable. We can go in there, we can look at, different companies and different construction crews, and we can look at it, fix it, get them re-engaged, get them motivated, get the right people in the right positions. Because, like I said, this to me is a very important topic and one I speak on a lot. But I think when we're talking industry specific, there are certain industries
Mm.
that it is definitely much more critical in than others. Yes, I want to see my financial institutes and my healthcare institutes and all these places having engaged employees. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, like I said, if we're in finance, accounting, IT, and the person next to me is just like about their job,
Mm.
I don't have to worry that I'm going to make it home that day. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but in other areas, you do.
You know what's funny is the stories because the other construction guys I'm friends with and know or have heard stories of what they've done. Like one of the friends of mine was working, and he would say he just was bored. He was just
Mhm.
no growth there. He was stuck in a territory, maintaining, doing maintenance on them and things like that in a city. And he had his little territory, and all he did per day was, like I said, get up early, go do maintenance. But he said, like, I don't have to do much. I just sit down there and kind of bored. I'm just sitting there playing with my phone most of the time. I'm like, why don't you want to do something else, like do more? And he's like, that's what they have me doing. Like, there's nothing else to it. They just want me to bill hourly and just keep it going.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's a
And
can you
that
imagine
comes
sitting there being
down
bored?
straight from, regardless if you're the head of a crew or the head CEO of a company, that just comes down to wanting to keep your employees engaged and happy. And here, these concepts of job enlargement, job enrichment, job rotation, they can happen on construction crews. They can happen
Yeah.
anywhere. I mean, I think there's sometimes that you get into these industries, they're like, oh, these concepts don't apply to us because we're laborers. We're blue collar workers. It absolutely applies to everyone.
Yeah.
It applies across the board to every industry, and being able to cross train your employees and give them the opportunity to say, okay, well, you learned a trade specifically in this area. Well, we can on the job show you how to do more over here. And then you can fill in when somebody's out, or you can try doing something different, or you don't have to be in the same spot every single time you come to this particular site. You can be doing something
Right.
different, which will keep you more engaged, more excited about the work that you're doing.
It's funny you said that. Another friend of mine wanted to move up. He wanted to get out of the field. He's like, you know, I just want to get out of the cold. I just want to advance myself and get into an office space and kind of finish my career in the office, project managing, whatever. And as soon as he did that change, the company moved him up, gave him the opportunity, paid him well. He didn't have the tools. He didn't understand the tools. He didn't ever work on Excel spreadsheets. He
Yeah.
never worked on software systems. He never worked on different tools that they use every day in the office to create project estimating, things like that. And they set him up for failure, which was pretty sad. They kind of threw him there, and then there was a lot of hierarchy, like, we don't want you coming in and changing the way we do things in the
Mhm.
office. We have a system. And of course the it was very traditional because it's been around for, I think the company was 40, 50 years old or something like that. very traditional right there. So they had no way to advance their employees, up the chain to teach them more. Go ahead.
And then the other thing that we worry about too, and I see this being even a greater impact for trade type jobs than even traditional white collar work, is AI coming in, right?
Mm,
And the fear of like, what's going to happen when a robot can sit at the bottom of an elevator shaft and press those buttons
right.
and sit there and do that robotically. Because what
Yeah.
you're describing very much so is, let's face it, is just rudimentary tasks that can be automated. And
Yeah.
once we kind of get to that point, which isn't that far off, we're going to be seeing a lot of these jobs being outsourced and being used by AI. And then people are going to be in other areas working in different other things. So to your
Hmm.
point there, preparing this workforce with the
Mm,
proper skills for the future is critical.
yeah.
And whether your company is doing it for you, which they should be,
Right.
if they're not, then you really should be out there doing it yourself.
Right. Yeah. You're talking about, robots going in and hanging drywall. I've seen
Yeah.
images of that already. Like it's coming. Like there's
Watch
definitely
some
a lot of
YouTube
automation coming.
videos from over here, what's going on in Cambridge, Mass. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not far off. They got robots going all around building things. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like when I watch some of those and I'm seeing Will Smith's iRobot movie, I'm like, here they
Right.
come.
Yeah. It's no joke. It really is, that way of, because we do have such a labor shortage, businesses, construction business particularly, have to evolve. They have
Mhm.
to change in order to be competitive, first of all,
Absolutely.
because, we want construction to be cheaper. Hopefully it does get cheaper if we're using automated processes and robots and things like that. It should. But then what happens to these skilled labor workers that are out there and don't have any Excel spreadsheet skills or any other, we'll be able to use AI to easily put in some numbers and probably give them the
Mhm.
results that they're looking for. But what are they going to do? That's what I'm wondering. Is just project managing, or you project manage robots? Like, I don't see what
I mean,
that's going to look like.
you're never going to fully 100% get rid of the people, because you're going to have some people
Yeah.
involved. You're going to definitely reduce the number of people, but yeah, you're going to
Yeah.
see a lot of them moving more into office type jobs, things like that, jobs that require creativity, innovation. Another thing that our society does not, is not built on, throughout our entire civilization, we have always said to people, we push down creativity. We say, don't go into
Mm.
the arts because there's no money to be there. Don't go into music because there's no money to be there. And I'm not proposing that people should go become artists. But what I'm saying is, there's a side of our brain when we do that, that we're shutting down. And,
Mm.
children, you have kids, the
Yeah.
why? I try all day long to answer all the whys. I tell you, by the end of the day, I'm kind of like, all right, ask your dad. But I
It's
really
true.
try to answer the whys, because when you stifle those whys, you're stifling the creativity already at an early age.
Mm.
And that's what's going to be needed for the future. Emotions is what an algorithm doesn't have. Creativity, innovation, algorithms will not have those type of things, those type of capabilities, at least not now, hopefully not. But we
You're
don't,
you're you're Yeah, go ahead.
it's different. It is completely different. So, where we've been doing a lot of left brain training and a lot of left brain work, we need to get that right brain going. And so to
Yeah.
tell people to take the elective as an art class, I say go for it. I'm not saying become an artist, but I'm saying keep your creativity going, figure out unique ways to approach something. And that doesn't mean go into, your top 5 law firm and say, I'm going to draw a picture for you, because that's the
Yeah.
way we're going to approach this. But what I'm saying is, we need to be creative. We need to be innovative. We need to look at new ways of doing things. And that's the
Yeah.
skill set that we're going to need in the future.
That's exactly what I was telling one of my buddies. I was really pushing for him to be an entrepreneur and
Mhm.
like get out of that just, he knows the industry, he knows everything about it. Like, go be an entrepreneur. You can start a company, like, but he was just not that, he's not programmed that way, right?
Right.
It's you're gonna have to go do some education and get them to learn about business, how businesses run, how to develop a business, things like that.
Yeah.
Because you're going to need more construction firms. I mean, it's literally, we're limited on firms now, so the prices are higher, right? So we got to bring that down. We got to get more businesses, construction businesses, particularly out there,
Yeah.
to be more
And I mean, if we
competitive.
think about how long something like this is going to take to change, think about this. It takes 6 months to change something for every year we've been doing it. So think about
Wow.
how long this has been entrenched in our society. And we're talking about making not just a culture change to an organization, we're talking about making a culture change
Yeah.
to an entire industry. It's going to take time. It's
Yeah.
not something that you're going to see overnight, but it begins with awareness. It
Yeah.
begins with acknowledgement, and it begins with taking a micro step, just a little
Yeah.
micro step. And guess
Yeah.
what? If everybody takes those little micro steps, they start to become bigger pieces.
I like the way you put that, because that's the right way to do it. How do you take on an elephant, right? One bite at a time, so to speak. And
Yeah.
that's what you got to do, is just get uncomfortable. I call it get uncomfortable. You got to
Mm-hmm.
get uncomfortable. Just if you want to start a podcast, get uncomfortable, start videoing yourself.
Yeah.
That's the only way to break that fear
Absolutely.
of being on the camera. Like we all,
I
I
know,
think
right
you're doing
here.
a speaking thing, right? Weren't you doing a speaking thing for introverts? Speaking. What was this you're working on right now? That's.
So I
I'm curious.
do. So one of the things I do is I'm working on a public speaking workshop for people, but I might have to rethink the name a little bit because I think it's scaring off everybody because it's introverts speak, which is completely contradictory to what introverts want to do. And I think when people see it, they get
I could be
scared
it.
and they're like, I don't know about this. But what I'm trying to point out to people is that traditional public speaking courses focus on traditional ways of public speaking. You stand in
Yeah.
front of a stage, you might have a podium, you don't move away, you don't tell stories, you give your lecture, you might have some PowerPoints backing you up, and you're pinned against a wall, and all of a sudden the wall's coming in, the people are coming closer, and you're like, oh my God, and you're out of there. You're running as fast as you can for your life because introverts
Yeah.
want to run away from those type of situations. And
Right.
public speaking classes don't address personality differences when it
Mm.
comes to public speaking. And it's such a stigma because so many people grow up thinking, I'm an introvert, I'm not good at this, I can't do this. And that's a completely wrong mindset. I'm an introvert. I don't like talking to people. I don't like speaking to people. I speak to
Yeah.
thousands of people all the time. I always tell
Yeah.
people, if I can do it, you can do it. It's understanding your approach and understanding your material, understanding how you want to. You will very seldom see me standing on a stage in the middle behind the stage like this. I mean, I'm out there, I'm out with the group, I'm doing it my way. And
I love it.
and you have to engage. And then storytelling is the other big aspect to it. We just
Yeah.
learned more about that when we were out in LA. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's all about storytelling. It's about engaging your audience, getting people in on the stories. It's so critically important. And but I think I have to rethink the name because I don't
Right.
I don't think the messaging is coming across the way I want. And then I think like people are just like at the last minute going, yeah, maybe I won't go because this is scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have a couple more minutes, but I wanted to talk real quick about you're an author as well. Like what a book? Let's talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, so I just co-authored the book with Brian Tracy, Success in Any Economy. And
Okay.
so my book chapter, believe it or not, is about not hiring your best friend. And so it's
Oh,
kind of
okay.
all around this
Smart.
concept of hiring for the right position, and that it's easy sometimes to get into that trap of a relative, someone you know, someone's close by, labor shortages, people are willing, just getting the people that are easy to get into the positions, or power plays, political moves. I'm going to, I'll hire your son out of college because you're the head of this company. And I think I can, I do something for you, you do something for me, that's
Yeah.
what, and now you have a workforce of people who are working in positions that shouldn't be in positions that are there
Oh.
because you made a deal, and it's just a giant mess. And so the whole chapter is about don't hire your friends. It's not, and again, if it's the right culture, right skill set, go ahead, hire your friend. I don't really care about that part, but it does become a little tricky with those difficult conversation times. And I talk about my own stories of going through it because, on the side of all the exciting things that I love to do, we had a dog training business for 5 years,
Okay.
and it was a manual labor, more intensive type job. And it was very hard staffing, especially post COVID. And
Yeah.
the people that I had working there were people that were friends. They were very good at what they did, but they were friends. And when those hard conversations had to come, as much as I can tell somebody what you need to do in those times,
Yeah.
stepping into those shoes are not as easy. And I had a hard time having those conversations, and I would avoid those conversations. And all it did was make everything worse. And I said I would never do that again.
That's a whole nother
I
podcast
know,
episode.
right?
You know that, right? Because I literally, the businesses I see in infrastructure, very traditional, but I can see what's happening is emotionally they get attached to the employees, and which is, having that connection is there, but it's still a business and you have to run it like a business. But you also need to figure out like putting the right people in the right place on the bus, right? The right seat, right? But there is some times where you're just not going to have the right people, and you got to figure out how to make that change in order for your business to grow. And that's what happens with a lot of the construction organizations that I see is they get stagnant. They don't want to hire more people. They're content with what they have now in the growth, because if they add more stress, more issues, more people they got to deal with potentially, it's a huge
and
mess.
it's managing those people too, right? Because what's a good fit now, 10 years from now may not be a good fit, especially if you haven't given them growth opportunities to change. If they're in the same job 10 years later, guarantee you that engaged employee that started is not so engaged 10 years later in the same salary, same job. It's just not there.
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait to read your book, and that's going to be fantastic. I want to keep talking about it, but we're out of time. So truly appreciate you joining me on the podcast. It's been enlightening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. No, how do people get a hold of you if they want to reach out?
Probably, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all under just Dr. Heidi is fine. You can find me that way.
Cool.
Sometimes it's Dr. Heidi, the business psychologist. It'll pop up. And my website's www.drheidegregorymina.com.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Heidi.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. And you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, you too.